"You mashed on my plus frames" is a really common phrase not just in Dragon Ball FighterZ, but in fighting games in general. The basic idea being, you're saying your opponent is so stupid for either not understanding how plus frames work, or understanding how plus frames work, and making a terrible decision anyway. And not to say that people won't use the phrase in all situations. Like, people will say, "Oh my god, you mashed on plus frames," when it doesn't work and when it does. But I'm like, there's a distinct difference, and you can hear it, right? There's a difference between being like, "No, you can't do that, that is plus on block," and being like, "Dude, that's fucking plus." Like, you can hear it. But one of the big things that I hate about this phrase is that it's so black and white, and it doesn't allow for any nuance. And you know what else really grinds my gears? Plus frames. An all-encompassing idea of plus frames. But just plus frames doesn't really define what the move does, because you could be +1, +2, +3, +6, +100. It's all just plus frames. But your response in each of these situations can be extremely different. And that's why in this video, I want to go over the differences between all the different variations of plus frames. Because being +1 on block and being +5 on block are not the same thing. Now, I want this video to focus on the more universal aspects of plus frames, so I'm not really gonna go over character-specific counterplay. Now, before I talk about anything, I want to talk about being 0 on block. This has the potential to be fairly common, because anytime you get hit with a 6M, you're gonna be 0 on block. But it's a lot more common with characters that now have a 0 on block normal, like a 2L that's 0 on block, because most of the time if someone's doing a 6M on you, they're probably going to be layering it with like an assist, or they're going to be in sparking. But after you block a 6M, you have a few options. The main way someone takes advantage of plus frames is just jabbing. That's going to be the fastest option that they have in almost every situation. And there's a few things that you can do against this. Obviously, you can always just block the jab. That is basically an option that doesn't really carry any immediate risk, but obviously, blocking your opponent is never great. That's not all. Obviously, if you have even 1 frame free, you can always reflect. But since you're 0, you can also press a button yourself, as long as you have a 6 frame normal. This initiates a clash sequence, which is just another guessing game that you're putting yourself in. Certain characters are better at clashes and certain characters are worse. I'm not really gonna go over clashes, but this is a way of basically challenging your opponent and trying to take your turn, but it does carry with it obvious risk. Now, if you wanna have a little bit less risk, a good option is backdash. Your opponent can read backdash and do something like run up and 2M, or sometimes even just IAD and do a normal on you. But in almost every situation, they're gonna have to read this. Another thing is, while you can technically jump or even super jump in situations like this, you won't get hit yet, but you can still be pulled back to the ground. Now, my personal favorite option for dealing with these situations is dash block. Why is this my favorite? Because it is basically just blocking plus. It's like new game plus for blocking. Like, from my perspective, if I'm ever just gonna block after taking this, then I might as well just dash block instead, because it does the same thing, but also counters certain other options. For example, if someone does an IAD right as you block a 6M, then they will also be covering backdash. If instead of just blocking the first IAD, if you do dash block, you completely ignore the situation. And there is no downside to doing this over just normal blocking. This isn't to say that it is good in every situation, or that you should never like challenge with a button or backdash, but to me, there's no reason to block here when I could dash block and it covers more stuff. Okay, but that is a situation where they are 0 on block. What do you do if your opponent is +1? Well, this one is really simple. In this situation, you can do everything that you could beforehand, but now you just can't press a button. Every other option that you had before, you still have, but now you have to block. You can't challenge unless... I said I wouldn't talk about specific characters, but I just want to talk about an option that is very prevalent in this game, and those are frame 4 reversal options. A lot of characters have things like this where they're armored on frame 4, or they have a guard point on frame 4, or they're just invincible on frame 4. And in situations like these, you can press as long as you have an option like this. Funny thing is that every character technically has a frame 4 reversal option, and that's Vanish. Vanish is frame 4, so it can mimic some other characters' reversal options. And even if your opponent counter vanishes you, it can be a lot better than taking a combo or a block string. Now, on something that is frame 2 is where we see the first removal of an option from the defender. And that is jumping out is no longer applicable, because your opponent will hit you on the first few frames of jump squat faster than you can leave the ground. Now before, even though jumping out would not beat your opponent just jabbing, it would beat basically any other option. And in that way, you can compare it to like dash blocking, where you are blocking, but just like more. This beats more than just blocking. So if your opponent were to have done a medium, or dash blocked, or done an IAD, jumping would have gotten you out, but you can no longer use that as an option. But everything else, you can still use reflect, you can still backdash, you can still dash block, and you can still use your 4-frame reversal options, which as always includes Vanish. Now, on frame 3, we see another removal of an option from the defender, and that's the 4-frame reversal option. Now the one frame 3 of a 6-frame normal, 4 frames will no longer work, including Vanish and any character specific option. And this removes a lot of threat from the attacker, because beforehand, in a lot of situations, you could still get hit on your own plus frames. Now, it is impossible to get hit on your plus frames unless your opponent uses a frame 1 reversal option, which is a lot different than a frame 4 reversal option. Not much is different between frame 4 and frame 3, but just to focus, when you start getting around like a decent amount of plus frames, characters can actually start challenging with mediums, which can be a lot more dangerous because if you get hit with a medium, you could die. But there's no major difference in options between frames 3 and 4. You could still dash block, you could still do everything you could before, you can still reflect here, all of that good stuff. Same thing with frame 5, just now you have to be even more cautious of medium options, because now it can be really easy for people to catch things like backdash while still not being at risk of you swinging back. But obviously, doing stuff like this can just open up new counterplay. Now, okay, before I talk about being +6 on block, I have to clear up something really quick. I'm sure most of you guys know how to read frame data, but I have to ask really quick. You see those two numbers right there? There's the 22 and there's a 22 in parentheses. I have to ask, do you guys know what that means? Like, do you guys know the difference or the distinction between the two of those? I bring that up because when I talk about something like beerus 236H held down, some people might think that it is +6 on block. And it technically is, but I just have to talk about what those numbers mean. So the number on the left, any move that you do will just show like the frame advantage of the actual move. Like, this is -20, this jab. The one on the right, the one in parentheses, you can think of it like your current frame advantage. When you do things like land on the ground, you'll see that -1 there. That's because whenever you land, you don't just land instantly, it takes a frame. So if you were to do a move in the air, while the move would end on frame 15, you would actually be -16 in this situation. And that's important to bring up because even though beerus is technically +6 when he does this move, he is counted as airborne when he's doing it. So obviously, he's gonna have to land, and when he lands, he will have 1 extra frame of landing lag. And because of all that, I have to say, this move is technically -5 on block. And you can tell that it's -5 because you can still do things like reflect. If this move was actually +6 on block, all of your options would be gone. And I can show you that with an example. So Android 16, I know we skipped over 7 frames, but basically after 6 frames, they're all like exactly the same. Android 16 has a move that is +8 on block. And he also has this, which is an 8-frame normal. Okay, now I had a previous video where I went over like how blocking actually worked in Dragon Ball FighterZ in detail, but the gist of it is as long as you block the first hit of a true block string, you don't actually have to block for the rest of it. You can do anything, you can try to mash, and nothing will come out because you are blocking a true block string. You'll see I am mashing light and nothing is coming out and I am not getting hit. Now, this works for a true block string, and in the same way that Android 16 is going from his lights into mediums into his heavies, because I have him set to doing something that is +8 on block into an 8 frame normal, I could do the same thing where I just mash 2L and I will not get hit and nothing will come out. And that is because there is no gap between Android 16 hitting his plus on block move and hitting his 2L. But the same does not apply to beerus. When beerus does his move, there actually is a gap between the last hit of 236H and his jab. And because of this, you can do things like reflect here, which you would not be able to do if this were a true block string. And I specifically had to bring that up because on Dust Loop, it lists the move as +6. So I feel like it would be confusing to people if I was calling beerus's 236H held down +5. So I just had to go over that really quick because also there's not like a lot of information. Like no one fucking tells you what the fucking parentheses thing means. Okay, anyway, so for the sake of this next example, I will just be using beerus IAD instant JM. Now, as we just talked about, when something is +6 or more, you can do any reversal option, and if your opponent does a true block string, nothing you do will come out. This includes things like reflect or reversal level 3, where you have to be careful is this will not work if your opponent is doing a low unless you are also crouch blocking. But if you're doing something like trying to reversal level 3 or trying to reflect, you won't be able to crouch block because you'll have to be holding back. So a weirdly like, I don't want to say safe option, but just an option of counterplay is doing crouch blocking after something that is +6 and then doing 2L. If your opponent hesitates for a minute, this can catch them. But if your opponent just hesitates for like 2 frames, you're gonna get hit here. But I just want to focus that this is an option. If your opponent instantly tried to do like a Dragon Rush here or just something sneaky, you could do this, and if they just did an actual block string, nothing would come out. I don't want to promote like mindless mashing, but I'm just telling you how it works, okay? You can choose the options for yourself. I don't want to promote mindless mashing. But anyway, all the other options here, you can't really use. You can't backdash in this situation. You can't reflect. It's basically the same as if someone was just doing an actual block string on you. That is literally the same effect of doing something that is +6 on block into a 6 frame normal. Or more, +7, +8, +9. After you get past +6, they really all just blend together to be the same thing. And if you have to block this, you can die. Anyways, that's the end of this video. Hope you guys found it informative, brain stimulating. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe, kiss me, and play video games.